Hello, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome to the Heart Set Above podcast. I'm Ellen Radcliffe, a therapist and a believer, here to help you navigate faith, relationships, and life in a world so far from Eden. This podcast is a space where we'll explore topics that matter deeply. Things like grief, connection, identity, and practical faith, grounded in both therapeutic wisdom and biblical truth. Whether we're wrestling with the messy middle between love and righteousness or learning to communicate like Jesus, we'll do it together with hearts set on things above. So grab your coffee, settle in, and join me as we pursue deeper connection with God, ourselves, and others. Let's dive in. Yep. I like to think of rest in its full form, restoration, right? Because I was thinking about like our podcast as of now. The tagline is where therapy meets theology. I want to capitalize on giving people an inside look into the therapeutic lens. Like I think in our culture, this is something people are really interested in. And I think there's a lot of like mystery around therapy for people who aren't kind of in this field. And so what I hope to do for listeners is to dispel some of those myths and mysteries and give people an insight into some of that, but also where it merges into our faith. And so we hear, and so sometimes I think like as Christians, we hear things in the pop psychology realm, right? Like self-care and how important self-care is. And then I think sometimes we can hear these things as Christians and think, that's just some worldly, earthly pop psychology nonsense. And that's not how we're called to live as Christians. And so actually, I think there's a lot of overlap in pop psychology. I think there's some crap in pop psychology, but I think there's a lot of overlap in how God calls us to live in pop psychology. We just have to sift through it to find the God in it so that we can live according to God's way and not according to our world's ways, right? Which is so like, that's so steeped in pop psychology. So when I think, it made me think about when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today, silence, solitude, Sabbath, rest, restoration. It made me think about that self-care. Like, I think that's what I talk a lot about with clients is resting, and kind of a synonym that I would use for it is connection. I think that's a big benefit of rest and restoration. I don't know. Is it making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hadn't, when I was writing my notes, I didn't think about connection, but I thought about connection in terms of to God when it comes to like the silence and solitude and Sabbath, and those like are very spiritual terms. And so it's easy to understand connection to God. But then I think something that like from a worldly perspective, something that self-care really answers is actually connection to self. And like sort of reconnecting with like what's going on inside of me, what do I need right now, but also like acknowledging that like maybe what you need is connection to your friends. Maybe you need some like really good time with like a really safe friend, or maybe you need time with like a family member that you find really easy to get along with. It's kind of like blow off some steam, good friend time sort of thing. Like that's such an important element to it. And I think it's, in a way, I feel like self-care is a very like palatable term for people who aren't Christians. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a palatable way of describing, I think, what God desires in Sabbath. Obviously in Sabbath, there's the element of like his presence to it, but I think they're actually fairly similar concepts. It's just the difference is like maybe the invitation, like God's invitation versus not.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you said that connection. This is like how I always frame it is we were created, because when I think of what Eden was, it was a total, complete state of connection with God, self, others, and I would say creation, the rest of creation, right? And ever since we've left Eden, we are not in that perfect state of connection with ourselves, with God, with others, our loved ones, our friends, our family, or with creation. Even we see nature is affected by the fall, right? So I hear this so often in my sessions with clients is I think you've even said this before, right? Like I really connect with God and with self and something greater than myself when I'm in nature, right?
Yeah.
I think there is something really healing about the beauty of creation. And I think we were created to be connected with it to some degree, right? Like we all experience that differently. But yeah, I think that this is like the ache that we all walk through life with when we're feeling. And it's so funny because a lot of times this ache comes from being too busy with our friends, with our loved ones, with things that we enjoy. And sometimes that can decrease our ability to really connect. I think, at least what I've seen in my own life and the lives of the clients that I've worked with, is this kind of connection that's had through rest, restoration, silence, solitude, Sabbath. It needs a lot of space. It needs some space to breathe, right? We can't just like rapid fire connect with God, self, others, and creation. We need some space and time to really indulge in that. And that's really hard to do in our modern world.
Yeah, it is hard to do. And I think I was saying this to you when we were speaking earlier today about how obviously the holidays have just passed. And I know for me, I can often enter the Christmas period being like, great, this is my time. This is my time of kind of restoring that connection. This is it. This is when I'm going to have days upon days to just be still and like reconnect with God, with myself, with and allow that space. However, even this Christmas, I found myself, even though I literally had those days to do that, there was almost like this resistance in me to it, because it was like, I don't know, like maybe it felt too overwhelming, or like it was like it was almost like there's so much that feels like it needs restoring that I don't even know where to begin. And I did find a place to begin in the end. I was like, I ended up just saying, okay, I just need to go on a walk and just walk beside God. Like, I don't even need to say anything. I just need to be outside. And I think that's kind of getting to that nature element that you were saying as well, like this idea of like being in the outdoors. And it wasn't necessarily to say anything, but it was just to walk with God in the quiet of the day as well. It was like quite late in the evening. And outdoors. And even just that just got the ball rolling for me in creating that space and allowing myself to be in that space in a way that felt like not overwhelming. I don't know. Do you ever experience that with like when you do finally get those opportunities? It's like, oh my gosh, this is suddenly too much. I actually don't want to do it.
Yes, that is a great point. I think I experience it for two reasons. One is like what you said, like, it's too overwhelming. There's too much to unpack. I don't know where to start. I just want to be, right? Like I don't want to actually go through the process of restoring and connecting. I just want to numb out, right? Like I think that's what I see a lot in the therapy office is people, they think relaxing is the same as restoring, right? Watching Netflix and scrolling on your phone at the same time is the same as restorative connection. And it's just not, right? And so sometimes I think I feel that resistance because I just want to relax, like an earthly version of relax. I want to watch Netflix and, scroll through my phone. But what I really need to do is restore and connect, which actually does take some intention and effort. And so I think sometimes that's my initial pushback is I don't want to put in the effort in order to restore and connect. But I love what you're saying, right? Like here's some practicals that you've developed for yourself that we can offer our listeners. Is go on a walk. Like just start somewhere. And that's kind of how I've determined how I'm going to move through life from now on is even when my to-do list, right? When I'm focusing on my to-do list or even my to connect to-do list, I'm just thinking, let me do something, right? Like let that be the victory of the day. If I can make some sort of connection or some sort of checklist off my to-do list, even if it's not all of it. And so when I have that mindset, then it's a little bit easier to get unstuck. And so I love how you're saying like, have some sort of ritual even to start it. If you know that going on a walk in nature helps, go on a walk in nature and be really intentional about that walk to say, okay, I'm going to go on this walk with God or to enjoy the beauty that God has created, right? There doesn't need to be an outcome to this walk. You don't need to walk out of that walk with some epiphany about life and spirituality and God and your faith. You just need to go and indulge in nature and in the creation that God has allowed you to be around you. I think for me too. So that's a big one for me, being in nature, going on a walk, listening to a song. There's some certain songs that kind of like help to unlock my heart, and they change from time to time. And so that's a great way for me to just kind of like jumpstart my heart, right? One of those like clear machines, like rubbing the pallets together. Clear, like jumpstart my heart in that way. And even a certain movie or TV show, right? Like that can help me kind of get in that frame of heart, in that frame of mind. Again, I don't think it matters so much what we do, going on a walk, listening to a song, watching a movie. It's more about the intention behind it. I've even gone on drives and listened to secular music, but I've thought, I'm going to listen to this song alongside God, with God next to me, just being mindful of his presence here. And that has served to really be a connecting time for me and God. So I think it has less to do with the what we do has more to do with the how we are intentional with indulging in the connection with God, with self, with others, with creation.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I love that term you use, what did you call it? Like connection to do. I love that. So cute. I love that. I need to start making connection to do lists.
Do you ever feel that way? Like overwhelmed by the connections you need to make?
100%. I think that's why I need to make lists of them, because I'm like, because otherwise they end up being a bit of a mind map in my brain. And I think that's, I work better with a list. And so I feel like that will help me actually like start somewhere. So I even think that's a bit of a practical, is to maybe just getting it down on paper of like, what's the connection to do that is needed right now? And then the how, coming from that place of like, okay, well then this is where I can start. And then whatever that might be. I'm trying to think of an example, but yeah, go on.
Well, I think what's difficult about what you're saying is, but what's so true and necessary for this kind of like creating a connection to do, or truly resting and connecting, is it requires reflection, which also requires time and intention, right? Like, I know that's true for me. If I just move through life without reflection, I might get my to-do list done, but my to connect list is starved. And then I start to feel really disconnected from God, self, others, my family, my friends, creation. And then I start to wither away as a human. I get hardened, I get angry, right? And then I start to shrivel up. And that's usually when people come into my therapy office, and when they're kind of in that same state and say, I don't know what happened. I don't feel connected to anything. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I'm angry all the time. I don't enjoy life anymore. And I think that's really at the heart of so much of what we see in therapy. Is you are disconnected. You have shriveled up because you have not fed those necessary veins of life, of connection that you need with God, self, others, and creation. And so I think what feels so counterintuitive when you get to that place is you need to stop and reflect, which requires stillness, but also intention together as you reflect on, where do I need to put some life, some connection into my life? And I don't think that reflection just needs to come when we're already shriveled up. That's the hardest time to do it. I think it needs to be like ongoing maintenance. We need to assess our life. I think that's part of the benefit of a Sabbath. I think that's part of what God intended was, hey, take one day a week where you don't produce anything, you don't do anything, where you just abide in me, you rest in me, you enjoy the life that I've created for you. But also, this is supposed to serve to offer you some perspective in life, that just because you're not doing something for a day doesn't mean that the world stops turning. It doesn't mean that I stop being God and that I stop working, right? Like, life goes on even if you lose a day of productivity. I think that's an important perspective giver in the Sabbath. Yeah. But so is that reflection. How is my life going? Am I living the way that I want to? Am I connecting with I know for me in my stage of life, the things that I often reflect on are, how is my marriage going? Am I getting the help I need and the support I need in my walk with God? Am I parenting the way that I want to parent, the way that God calls me to parent? Are my children getting the teaching and instruction and love that they need from me, right? So like, it's not like I necessarily have a time during my Sabbath practice that I think through all of these things, but Sabbath allows me the space to reflect on my life so that I can analyze and assess that, right? Like God says, this is a thinking man's religion. He wants us to test and approve our faith in our life, not just to blindly go through it. And I think reflection is needed for that, but so is rest in order to have that space for reflection.
Yeah, that's so true. Those two things, they go hand in hand. Like they're very much, they work together because it is so hard, I think, to make that time to reflect if you don't have the rest to go alongside with it. And I appreciate what you said as well about it being almost like a muscle, right? Like this thing that we want to exercise and keep up routinely. And in a way, it's obviously we can't avoid like the devastating things in life that will cause us to that will cause disconnection. But it is a preventative measure against those maybe more mundane ways that we end up disconnecting from God, like just like a matter of like busyness or feeling like I've been reading this book, I think I told you about it, Invitation to Silence and Solitude. But one of the chapters is Dangerously Tired. And it talks about this idea of like just allowing yourself to get to this point where it's like you are just exhausted, and the importance in those moments of like taking care of your physical body first and foremost, like do you need sleep, do you need food, so that you can prepare yourself for like a time to reflect and a time to like be with God and connect in that way. But this is like all to say, we like that chapter is all about, we don't want to get to the point of dangerously tired. Like we kind of want to avoid that at all costs. But if you are there, this is how you can get out of it. But we don't want to be there. And I think the consistency of rest with God and Sabbath helps avoid those dangerously tired places,
Yes. And I think, like you said, obviously we can't avoid those kind of natural things that disconnect us from God. But I do think there is some influence because I think we all live there. Like our Western modern world, that is the norm, to be on the verge of dangerously tired all the time.
Right.
Like I think our understanding of rest and abiding in God and restoration and connection is so threadbare compared to what God intended for it to be. I think that's true about a lot of things in our life, but especially our understanding of connection and restoration. And so I think we just live there. Like we live on the verge
Teetering
of
on the
burnout
edge.
constantly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that if we actually did have a more robust, full sense of rest, connection, silence, solitude, Sabbath, then those things that do happen in life that could really get in the way of us and God. It's not that those won't be difficult and that they might not create a bump in our connection with God. Absolutely. But if you think about it like an immune system, I think we'll be better prepared to weather those things, right? Because I think what happens, what I see in my life, at least, and the lives of a lot of clients that I work with, is their rest immune system, their self-care immune system, if you will, is so low all the time. That's just their norm, that when something happens in life that makes them sick, right? They get hit with a virus, someone dies, they get hurt by a friend, they lose their job, whatever it is. And that kind of turns into their relationship with God, and there's a bump in their connection with him. It's because their immune system is so weak already that it creates such a big disruption in their connection with God, with self, with others, and with creation. If instead their immune system was already at full capacity or closer to full capacity, I wonder if we would be able to weather some of the storms of life a lot differently. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I was going to ask you actually about your course and if it had any sort of, because obviously your course had like more of a Christian perspective, and certainly more than mine. But I was wondering if there was any teachings in that on Sabbath or on like rest and how that applies in client work and that combination of that psychology perspective and Christian perspective. I don't know if you would remember, but, and I've kind of put you on the spot, but
No, you're talking about my grad program. I don't remember any specific talks around like rest, connection, restoration. I do know that, the program I went to was faith-based, and I was so fortunate to go with brothers and sisters in the faith. And so and it was a small cohort. So we got to kind of wrestle through some of this stuff together and talk through it together. I think one thing that I don't think we learned it maybe from the professor, but that we all talked about, including the professors, was therapy offers what a lot of people had in the past in community, right? Like if we understood community, and I think that's can be a part of the umbrella of self-care, rest, restoration, Sabbath, etc., then a lot of us wouldn't need to go to a place, a therapy office, where we can experience unbridled connection with another person and really feel seen, known, and understood if we had that in our communities, right? So I think that's another kind of symptom of having such a threadbare understanding of connection in general in life, which affects our rest, restoration, Sabbath, etc. One of the symptoms of that is we don't feel seen, known, and understood by many people in our life. And so a lot of us need to go to a place like therapy to be seen, known, and understood so that we can get that need met, to be seen, known, and understood by another, but mostly so that we can see, know, and understand ourselves. A lot of people go to therapy for that connection with self, which is so important. I think we were created for that. But I think there are other ways besides therapy to get that. I don't think therapy is a bad way to get that need met, but I think that historically those needs have been met outside of therapy in community, in other realms of connection. But because we're so threadbare in that in our society, a lot of people have to go to therapy to get that need for self-connection met.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it is, I feel a lot of I remember when I joined the course, I had this reading about, just why therapy is so needed today. And it did speak to that sense of we are threadbare in connection. It was about, what was it? Well, one of the major things they said was obviously the pandemic and how that just sent things in such another direction in terms of disconnection. It was just a whole nother scale that no one could have anticipated and no one was prepared for, really. And even since then, I don't know how well we've recovered as on a global scale in our connection to one another. And then so as the pandemic, then it was also our relationship with technology and the fact that we're processing information at a quicker rate than we were ever meant to, than we ever have before as well. Our brain's capacity has been really pushed in terms of how quickly we process now. And then it was also disconnection with the planet in terms of how climate change has had such a huge impact on, for example, Gen Z, and how their feelings of doom towards the planet kind of gives them a sense of apathy, which then leaves them disconnected. And so it's no wonder we're threadbare. Look at the state of the world, right? No wonder things are so hard, and no wonder people are kind of turning to therapy to find some answers or to find some space. I think, it's almost that space that we were talking about earlier that we need in order to get back to connection. It sounds like people may go to therapy first to experience it. And then maybe over time in therapy, the hope is that they learn to cultivate it for themselves in their own lives. But it starts with being in that counseling room. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I think what therapy does is it forces people to have that time for reflection. That's what I do in therapy with a lot of people, is we sort of walk them through how to reflect. We do it together at first, and then they learn the tools to do it themselves. But once you get to that place of learning how to reflect, how to manage your own life instead of having it manage you, you can build it in, do it yourself. It turns into maintenance, and then you can build in space. Unfortunately, it does require some pruning. Yeah. I think that's a big part of this that I see, especially in my own life, and I see it in multiple areas, right? We are programmed as humans, I think, to seek out novelty. Our brains are programmed to seek out novelty. But if you live life the way that God calls us to, there's not a lot of time or space for novelty, right? If we really indulge in godly self-care, the kind of restoration connection that he created us for, that means it applies to so many areas of life. It means we're eating foods that fuel our body effectively. It means we're taking care of our homes, our relationships. We're doing what we do as if we do it for the Lord. There's just not a lot of time for novelty. Right. And I think that scares us as humans because we live in a world that is so full of novelty, right? Like it's so ripe for the picking. Like you're saying, there's never a lack of information. There's never a lack of novelty in our life. But I see this even in my relationship with food, right? I've struggled my whole life with my relationship with food. I think it's a part of the fall, right? Like my body and my brain does not work the way that it should with food. And and also part of the fall, I struggle with self-discipline in that area. And so I've just struggled with it my whole life. And what I noticed throughout various, interventions I've tried with my relationship with food is the novelty is always what gets me in trouble, right? Like I want to eat and I want to eat well because I want to fuel my body appropriately. But when I go to a restaurant, for example, or I walk into a grocery store and there are so many options, that is really a big problem for me in trying to live out godly self-care. If I were given much fewer options, I would be much happier with those choices and my body would be fueled more appropriately. This is even scientific. They did a scientific study about this years ago that they took two different groups, one to a Baskin Robbins, which had 50 ice cream flavors, and one to an ice cream shop that had 3 flavors. And they polled them afterward to see who was happier. And the people who only had 3 options for their ice cream were much happier than the people with 50. Because when you go and there's so many options, there's so much novelty, you get your choice and you think, man, I should have gotten that. Or it's easier to compare. So-and-so looks so happy with their coffee ice cream and I'm here with my chocolate ice cream and I'm not as happy, right? And I think that's so appropriate to our life living for God is when we actually make our world smaller, less novel, more structured and routine, not boring. I think God created us to live life to the full, not to be boring. But there's actually, then we can indulge in it. We can connect deeply instead of thinly over, I think the way our life is now, we connect very, what is this word?
Shallow?
Shallow. Yes, thank you. Very shallowly to many things instead of deeply to a few things. And I think that's what has been important for me in my own journey with connection and restoration is I want to prune my life so that I can connect deeply with a few things instead of shallowly with a lot of things, with too many things.
Wow. I have questions for you about that because I think about I was thinking about Sabbath and rest and how it can be different, like depending on if you're married and if you're single. And this the simplifying of life and like connecting deeply with few things. I think about my life. I'm like, well, that's easy to do because I don't have much demanding for my attention. But then I think about your life, Ellen, and I think about the amount of things that fight for your attention. And I'm like, how do you go about that? Because I imagine there will be people who listen to this who are married and have children, like be it young children like yourself or older children, or maybe they have busy homes. And what does that look like in your stage of life? This pruning and what does that look like?
I think it looks like boundaries, which we should probably have a whole series about, right? What are boundaries and how do you implement them and how should you think of them? But I think it looks like boundaries. I will say, fortunately, what I love about getting into this stage of life that I'm in is that everyone else is in the same stage of life. Like all of their time is so thin as well, right? You got kids, you got spouses, you got work, right? There's so much vying for your attention that people get it more, right? So when I have to say, look, I just can't make this friend outing or I have to cancel this or that, people are a bit more understanding than they would have been in my 20s or, earlier in my life when I needed to cancel plans or say no to something because they get it, right? So I think that's been really helpful. But I think it also, of course, it's always difficult to say no, to prune, to implement boundaries. And I think what's been important for me is that mindset, that heart set above mindset to say, wait a minute, what is my measure of success here? Who am I seeking to please with this? Who am I seeking to model in this? Is it someone else's behavior, my behavior, or is it Jesus's behavior? And if I have that mindset, then it's a little bit easier to communicate. And I think it helps to communicate with compassion first, right? I'm so sorry. I'm unable to fill in the blank, meet this expectation of yours. I want to. If I had the time, I would. But I've got to, give my best to what I do have on my plate. Right. And if I do this, it will take away from things that I've already committed to. And I think anyone in any stage of life can understand that conundrum. And so, Yeah, and I think that it is like a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. But let me say to all of our listeners, we are coming at you as two people who still wrestle with this. Like, we have not figured anything out. So this is part of why we're talking about this, to like get our own conviction about this, make sure we're living in the way that we should. And this is truly a journey, right? Like, I don't have anything figured out, and things are continuing to morph. I'm still learning how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to have that perspective on how I should be living. So yeah, but I do think as you go through life, it is like this, it's like a wave, like it comes and goes. I've seen in this new stage of life for me that my natural tendency is just to say no to things, because I know, like, I just have no time. I have no capacity. Yeah. But there have been times where I've realized I think I've said no to too many things and I need to go pick some stuff up, right? So again, I think that reflection is so important to continually gauge, where am I? Do I have the capacity to add something to my plate or not?
Yeah, and I think that's important, that it's not necessarily static, because life is not static, is it? Like, there are these like ebbs and flows of time and availability, and even I think about the Ecclesiastes and this idea of like a time for everything. Like, there is a time for maybe more yes, and there is a time for maybe more no's. Like, and it makes a lot of sense that it's about like knowing your limits. And I think that is what Sabbath is about as well. Like, it's about really a recognition of like living in your limits, and you're living in your I suppose in your limitations in how much you can do in a day, or how much you can change the world in a day. Even in this book, this Invitation to Solitude and Silence, it talks about how an aspect of Sabbath is rest for the mind, and allowing yourself to not try and like fix the world with your mind and like come to all the answers to all of your questions. Like, it's truly allowing yourself to be in the I don't knows of life, and allowing I don't know to be the answer. And it uses that Psalm, I believe, Psalm 131. It's, I do not concern myself with matters too lofty for me, as a way to kind of, as a spiritual reference for that mindset of like, I'm going to live in the I don't knows. I'm not going to concern myself with matters too lofty. But it's a living in your limits, which I think is a massive part of Sabbath. It's an acknowledgement of like, I can't do everything, and I am just human, and I do need rest, which I think, is massive.
Snaps for that phrase. I love that phrase, living in your limits. That is it. Like, that is the point. And I think if you think about it like a budget, right? I remember having a client once who, he grew up in a really wealthy family. There was never really any restrictions on his spending. And even after he left home, he still had access to the family, credit card or trust fund or whatever it was. And so he could just spend. And I remember him saying, sometimes I would spend something like a smaller amount and my parents would be upset with me. And then I would spend a much bigger amount on something else and they wouldn't be upset. And he was like, I never knew what was okay to spend and what wasn't. But then he got married to a very frugal woman who was very type A, like very on top of the finances, and she kind of ran the finances. And I remember asking him, like, so how's that going? And he was like, actually great. I love knowing what the limits are. I love knowing where the boundary is. I love knowing what I can spend, what I can't, how much is in my account, what I can spend on this, what I can spend on that. And I think I've heard that from so many people, even people who have had to arduously get on a budget. They're saying, yes, it was difficult, but I love the freedom of spending within my limits. And I think I love that phrase. Yes, this is what Sabbath is. This is what restoration, connection, silent solitude is learning to connect, but also practically learning how to live within your limits. That's what that reflection allows us to do, is to set those limits so that we have the space and capacity to connect, which is so vital to our service and to, all that we do to pour ourselves out. So it's kind of like this circle that keeps feeding each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think those things are so intertwined, like the connection and the limits. Because I think it's very humbling. I find it very humbling when I realize I can't, this state of disconnection, I'm feeling starved by it. It's actually not, it doesn't fill me with life. Like I can often, this is really embarrassing to admit, but I often think to myself, and I tell my friend this in Edinburgh, I always tell her when I have a really busy time, like week or time in life, I say to her, it's okay because I'm a shark. And I just have this like shark mentality of like, I can just do it and I'm just going to get through. And it's like, and I think when I think about how burnt out I can get because I think I'm a shark, it's like God going like, you're not a shark. It's the most ridiculous example, but I see it.
It's not. Because I love that, right? Like even what you said a minute ago, there's a time for everything. You were created with an amazing ability to endure and move forward, right? Like to persevere and do. I think God created you and all of us with that ability in varying degrees, right? So I think it's true that you do have the ability in short bursts in a season to say, I'm just going to lock this up and endure. I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think that's actually really healthy. But when we live that way constantly, obviously that becomes very unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly. It is exactly that. It's like there is a short amount of time, like maybe it's good for a week. But then as soon as I start thinking, well, I can just do this. I can just live like this. I'm moving at such a fast pace. I'm a shark, king of the sea. But
what would the new phrase be?
Oh gosh, yeah. But yeah,
human with shark abilities.
Yeah, what would it? It would be not king of the sea. Definitely not that. It would have to be
king of the sea abilities in short.
King bursts. Of the yeah, exactly. I can sometimes shark mode maybe.
Oh, I love that. I'm a delicate human with shark
mode.
But when your battery starts to run low, you got to go back to human.
Yeah,
mode.
exactly. I have to return.
You can activate shark mode, but then you got to put it back in.
Exactly.
Neutral.
Yeah. But it's humbling in a good way. I think it like helps me. It helps me to because then it reminds me of like it's my limits, but that's why I need the rest. That's why I need God. That's why I need connection. I can't just do things on my own and like do this kind of bulldozing course. Like it has to be with others, in touch with myself and in touch with God and from a place of being rested.
And I think, like we said, with that intention, it makes such a difference when we do have to activate shark mode, if you will. It makes a difference to have that intention behind it, right? Like this is a lot of the work I do with people in therapy. They'll say, we're working on things like boundaries and self-care and restoration and connection. And so, they're trying to implement some boundaries around their time and their connection. But then sometimes something happens in life and they're going to have to activate that shark mode. And there's a big difference when you just naturally slip into shark mode because you feel like you have to. There's no other recourse. And when you, through that place of reflection and intentionality, can say, okay, this is going to be a tough week or a tough month because I'm going to have to activate shark mode. And that means I'm not going to get the time with my friends, with my family, with God that I want to, that I'm used to. But after that time, right, when that month is over, when that week is over, then I'm going to intentionally stop and have a nice long weekend where all I do is indulge in connection with my God, with my friends, with my family, right? Like there's such a difference when you can have the intention behind it instead of feeling forced into it. And I think that's what reflection offers us, is that I'm in charge of my life I'm running my life instead of my life is running me, right? I have to be in shark mode all the time because otherwise I won't survive, right? When you can say, I'm in neutral, but I'm going to have to activate shark mode for the next week, for the next month. And it's going to be tough. Here's what I'm going to have to sacrifice. And here's how I'm going to get out of it when the time is over. That's much more manageable and doable and healthier than constantly living in shark mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the as a mental health advocate that I follow online, who I really love, but she recently lost her mum, but she said something to that effect, and it was very powerful for me because she's someone who I've noticed through like following her like online that she has a very like she really values like that rest time. But then when her mum passed away, in the month leading up to her death, she was like, now is not a time for process. Now is a time for taking care of my mum. I will process after she has passed away because I know she's passing away. But right now I need to put it to one side. I need to put my grief to one side, but I will grieve. And I loved like what you said, like just she is really in charge of like what's going on for her and her time and her space. Like she's not reacting. I mean, obviously, you know, the death was unexpected. Like there is a certain level of reaction, but she was very much like, when can I do the things I need to do? When can I take care of the things I need to take care of? And like, you know, the immediate thing was like, I need to take care of my mum. And then secondary was, I will take care of myself. And she just knew that for herself. And I think seeing that, I really admired that, because I was like, wow, she just knows. And that's, I mean, it was like, you know, she was saying to herself, like, this is the worst thing I've ever been through. And I think, but what I was so moved by that and really was like, wow, I hope I can be like that one day, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, when you build that muscle of reflection in your life, and you can build in that, John Mark Comer, who wrote a book about Sabbath that I really love. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He calls it margins. When you can build margins in your life, so not just living within your limits, but building in margins within those limits so that it can account for life's unexpected things. When you build that muscle and can do that, I think you become more and more adept at it. And you can, when you build in that time for reflection, prioritize and say, all right, now is the season to care for, and then it'll be the season to mourn, right? So I'm putting a pin. It's not that I'm not feeling the grief now, but I'm not going to indulge in the grief until it's the right time. Right now is the time to mourn, to lock that up so that I can pour out myself for someone else. And I do think, like, when we leave space when we leave margins, when we learn to connect, when we learn to restore instead of just relax, we build that muscle, and we can more easily reflect in the moment and reprioritize. It allows us to be much more flexible in life than just living in that shark mode where we feel like we have no agency. And I think, you know, one thing I heard recently from some sort of mental health person is the number one key factor in living a happy, healthy, well-adjusted life is flexibility. And I think that when we have reflection, we can be more flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's so funny because we can think of like having to put these things in place as like the very thing that makes us rigid, but it's the very thing that makes us flexible. It's the complete opposite. But I feel like that's just, it does speak to like, God's kind of like topsy-turviness, you know, like this idea of like what you think will make you rigid or like more difficult, it actually will create ease, it will create freedom, it will create flexibility.
Yeah, it's always opposite, right?
Yeah.
Kingdom way.
Totally.
So let me ask you, Georgia, as a therapist, as a Christian, is it wrong to practice self-care?
No. Surely. No, it's not wrong. It's not wrong. I think it's one of those buzzwords, isn't it? That I think it's just loaded down with so much assumptions about it being overly indulgent and selfish and kind of time wasting even, or like taking away from what needs to be paid attention to. But actually, I think self-care through the ways you've described today is the very opposite of those things. It isn't selfish. It actually like frees you up and like fills you up to take care of others and to be present to your community. It's a good use of time because it does take care. I can't remember the other things I said, but it is the opposite.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Like, well, it depends on what you mean by self-care. I had a client who called that kind of earthly self-care, right? This buzzword, when what people mean is go get your nails done once a week, go, think that you're more important than anyone else in your life, basically, is what I think pop psychology means when they say self-care. And I had a client who used to call it plastic fantastic. Plastic fantastic, right? Like that's what this modern understanding of self-care is I'm so wonderful, everyone else is puny, and I need to be lifted up above them. Obviously, we can't get on board with that definition of self-care. That is the opposite of what God calls us to live. However, caring for our bodies, our connections, our hearts, our relationships, and our time, our rest is absolutely in accordance with how God calls us to live. And it helps us, like we said, that cycle, it helps us to continue to pour ourselves out for ourselves, for God, for our families and friends, and for everything else that God has put in our path, right? So it's not just good for us to do. It's not just something we are allowed to indulge in. It's something we ought to indulge in order to continue to live our lives for God, pour our lives out for God. So how would you help our listeners, right? Like, let's create some sort of structure. If we're saying, hey, self-care is restoration, connection, reflection, silence, solitude, Sabbath is all a part of that. Let's create like a structure for them. What could that look like? What does it look like for you? Or what could it look like for a client or a listener?
I think a lot of what we've said, like the how, like it's not necessarily like what it looks like, but it's how you experience it. Like, I don't think there's any sort of, like, even when I think about this idea of like going for a walk, I think I used to think this self-care, this rest, this restoration, it would mean, okay, if I'm going for a walk, I have to have this like deeping prayer time, and I have to like, that's going to be the form of self-care. But then I realized that was part of what was overwhelming me and stopping me from actually going on the connecting walk. And so I think removing the pressure of what you expect connection to be, or how you expect to appear before God or before yourself, and to really just allow yourself to be however you are. Like, you know, and maybe that is just going for a walk. Maybe that is just needing to sleep for longer if it's a matter of your physical body. Maybe it is, you know, eating a certain way for a day, or just drinking water. It may be journaling, but like, you don't have to put pressure on how much you need to journal. You could just journal one sentence, and maybe that's all you need. Like, I think removing the pressure from what those actions are, and the expectation from what those actions are, and doing what is maybe innate is the right word. Like, what is innate is a starting point.
I love that. I think what I kind of heard you say is the outcome is not the point. It's not the measure of success. The measure of success is the intention behind it, right? I drink a glass of water. I sleep a few extra minutes or an extra hour because my body needs it. Connect that with the intention, right? It's not, I overslept because I'm so lazy, right? Or, I'm drinking water and it's taking away from me doing my to-do list. No, it's I'm stopping intentionally and fueling my, watering my body. I don't know.
Yeah,
giving my body the water, hydrating. Thank you. Hydrating my body because I need it. And God created this world to meet my needs. He created water to be on this earth in abundance so that my need for hydration could be met, right? Like connecting with the intention of that and indulging in it and letting that be even something on your to-do list. Look what I did today. I connected with a part of creation by drinking enough water, or by sleeping a little bit more. I allowed God to care for me by indulging in this extra hour that, I was able to rearrange my schedule and sleep because my body needs it. And, God created me to need sleep. And that's a reminder of my vulnerability, right? Like allowing the intention behind the action to be the measure of success. I love that as a starting point. I would even say too, create the starting point, or, just like a place to start here is creating a space at least every week to be, to reflect, to indulge, right? And it's like you said, start small, go on a walk. Don't have any expectation for what that looks like or walking away with any big epiphanies. Make the goal just building in the time. Do the walk, right? Build the walk. You don't have to come out of that walk with anything, but just build in the time. That is the goal. And then I think once you get that down pat, you can build on it from there, right? So the way I would say connection kind of looks, my connection and restoration looks is, I would say every day at least I have some sort of time for reflection. Usually it's a little bit jarred. It's usually like in the middle of driving somewhere, or, as I'm doing the dishes at night and I'm thinking, okay, what do I still need to do? It's very much going through my to-do list, but it includes my to connect list, right? What did I do? What do I still need to do? What can I be proud of that I did? What do I need to focus on tomorrow or this week, right? Sometimes it's very discombobulated and even chaotic. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, my kid said this word. I need to teach him about that. I need to, I need to nip that in the bud. I need to correct him on that or this. My husband and I got in an argument about that, and we need to revisit that, right? Like, okay, that's all a part of reflection. That's good. That's good for me to be aware of. I don't need to be ruled by it. My day doesn't need to be, taken off course because of it, but I need to be aware of it, and that's good. So that probably happens at least daily, sometimes multiple times a day. Once a week, we do have a time of Sabbath, me and my family. Sometimes it looks different from week to week. We try to do a whole day. Sometimes we're only able to do maybe half a day, but we try to do it where we don't have any productivity. We're not doing anything that doesn't, kind of our words that we orient our Sabbath time around is cease, abide, delight. We cease the hustle, abide in God, and delight in Him and what He's given us, right? So we play games, we read a book, we try to be outside a lot, we go to a park, we take a walk. Sometimes we do, it's not like a traditional Jewish Sabbath, we do cook, but that's because during the week we don't have much time to really make a fun meal. So we cook stuff that we enjoy, and we're going to try something out and really take our time and enjoy the cooking process. So anything that will give us enjoyment, or like you said, just kind of living in those limits, right? Enjoying what God has given you, not adding to it, but just living in what is already there. So we try to do that weekly. And just what happens naturally for me there is I do have a time for reflection. It's inevitable. I can't help but take stock of my life. What's happening? What do we need to focus on? It's usually during these times, sometime during this Sabbath day, that I'll say to my husband something like, hey, our son is really slipping on his obedience. We probably need to bring that up at our next family devo, right? Or he's been doing really good at caring for his little brother. And so we need to really rave him about that. We need to really build him up on that, right? So those kinds of things come out of that reflection process. That's also the time where I'm like, hey, I haven't seen my friend so-and-so in a while. I should probably reach out to her. Or, oh, so-and-so is going through this really difficult thing in life. Let me reach out and see how she's doing, right? So making time for that kind of connection, correspondence on Sabbath is a great thing to do too. And then I would say beyond that, my husband and I try to get away. We don't really have a set time, but I would say at least 2 or 3 times a year, just the two of us. And when we get away, that's also a great time to kind of gain perspective on our life and reflect, right? We have that rest, that connection. We're not in the regular rigmarole of life, but that is a great time as we're indulging in that restoration and connection. It's a great time to reflect and say, what's going well in our life? What do we like? What do we not like, right? What do we need to look forward to in this next season of life? And what do we need to protect against in this next season of life? And then beyond that, I would say annually, my husband and I build in a time of reflection every year where we kind of, on a grander scale, reflect and say, what do we give our time, our intention to? What do we give our energy to? What do we give our money to? And what do we want to change? What do we like about what we did this year? What do we not like about what we did this year, right? So I think that reflection, that process of reflection, allows us to build in that space, that margin for restoration and connection. And because we've done this for a few years, it's kind of like this muscle that's now so much a part of our life that's sort of how I think of life is, okay, the most precious things in my life are my connection with God and my connection with my family. Everything else serves that. It lives out around it. It's important, but nothing is more important as that, right? So as I go into the day, or as I go into a week or a year, I can orient myself around that core, right? And say, okay, what is going to get in the way this day, this week, this month, this year of my connection with God, my connection with my family, and what boundaries do I need to have around that? And what allotments, like what flexibility do I need to have around that to meet other needs that might press in on that? And that's okay, right? Like other things might take priority for a time. I might have to go into shark mode for a time where other things impress upon that core for a little bit. And that's okay. What do I need to be aware of? What boundaries need to be around it? And what flexibility can I have within it? So I think living that way not only builds in that space for connection and restoration, but also it allows that spiritual discipline of reflection so that we can, like you said, life isn't static, so that we can continually change this so that we can continue to have that space for connection and reflection.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what I heard in that was just how these times that you build out, it really allows like what might be not easy to perceive in like times of business to really come to the surface. Like you said, like, oh, I haven't connected with that friend in that while, or like noticing things about your son, like maybe they rise a bit more to surface in these times. But I love that you meet those reflections not with like a criticism or like even like an anxious like, okay, well, I got to fix that. It's like, oh, this is what's coming to mind as I'm in this more reflective space, as I'm in this still space. And you don't let it take away from the stillness. If anything, you kind of make note of it and be like, okay, this is something that I want to move forward with in terms of like working with, or, you know, going after. Like it allows you to be preemptive with your life and, you know, shape those things that are coming up, rather than like in that very moment going, okay, well, I'll just go and fix that right now. Like, okay, I've got the answer and now I can go. It's like you still keep yourself in the stillness, but just remember it as like something to shape as you move out of the rest space.
I'm curious, you're the one reading the book on this, you're the expert here. Does that come up in your book on stillness and solitude? Like, is that a benefit of stillness? Is things kind of, the noise of life quiets down a bit so that the things that are maybe under the surface but very important start to rise? Yeah,
definitely. I think, let me look at the page. I've got it right here. I mean, definitely, I haven't finished the book yet. I will say I'm about halfway through now. But I think there was an analogy, and I think I maybe said it in a previous episode, about how, you know, our moments of stillness, it's like having a jar of river water shaken up. And like initially, it's like all the sediment is like flying around the jar and you can't even see through it because it's so loaded with like pieces of rock and sand. But then as that water swirl stops swirling, all the sediment falls to the ground of the jar, and then you can see through. And it's kind of like, I feel like it is very much that, where it's like you can then see through to the things that are coming up, like what is important. Like, I think for me, something I've been thinking a lot about in my times of silence is like, what would God say to me at this point in life? Like, what's his thoughts on like, this stage of my life? What's he excited about for me in this stage of my life? What gives him joy? What's he looking forward to? And I think for me, those moments of silence kind of are the sediments of my life falling to the bottom, so that I can see through it and see like maybe the answer to those questions, if they are even there. Sometimes it is, I don't know. But I think it's also the same for like the things in our lives as well. Like it allows you to see through and sort of go like, oh, that's a friendship I could tend more to. Like I'm noticing that, or that's something I'm feeling excited about that like I didn't realize I was feeling excited about. And yeah, so certainly it's a big kind of overflow from stillness, I think.
Yeah, I love that. You know what I was thinking about when you were saying that is, I would say the phrase that my husband and I say to each other most often on Sabbath is, I love our life. Like we'll look at each other several times throughout the day and say, I love our life. I love our home. I love our family. I love our life. Like we say it so many times during that, you know, that Sabbath day, but even beyond, right? Because it's become so much a part of how we try to view life. And I think if I'm being totally brutally honest, this is why people come to therapy. That's at least why people come to my therapy office. I think people come because they think something needs to change in my life. A component of my life needs to change. I actually think most of the time what I see is nothing externally needs to change. This is what needs to change, the perspective of your life. And the way that you change that perspective is through connection and restoration, through building that space, which I don't think can happen without reflection. So I think, like, unfortunately, people come to our offices and say, like, well, here's my life. Here are all the components. What do I need to change? What do I need to take away? What do I need to add? Yeah. And most of the time, I'm like, all of those ingredients are great, right? The thing that needs to change is you're not indulging in any of them. You're not enjoying any of them. You're not connecting with any of them because either there's too much or your perspective is skewed. And so if you build in the time to cease, abide, and delight in what you already have, then that river water does settle down a bit. There's not all that sediment going everywhere. There's not all that noise. And at least once a week, you can sit down and say, I love my life. Look what I get to do. Like, yeah, it's tough. Monday through Saturday, Sunday through Friday. It's really difficult. but there's so much good in it too. I think that's the missing key for so many people that come to therapy is they're only focusing on the sediment. They have no time for rest from that sediment where everything is settled and they can see straight through it and say, wow, but look how much good there is here. When you don't have that coupled with that, sediment moving around every week, life gets so discombobulated, so topsy-turvy, and you get depressed, you get anxious, you get sometimes even worse. And then you got to go to therapy and, go through this whole big process. So I would say to listeners, yes, start small, start with intention, and start with something really small, just going on a walk, listening to a song, intentionally watching a movie, intentionally being aware of God's presence, and build on that. But start small and start with intention, right? It just starts with that intention of intentionally connecting, intentionally restoring, not just relaxing, restoring and building in the time to live within your limits. That's really, a big part of this, which requires reflection.